what Japan did is they brought down their tariffs. They gave us $550 billion because they didn't want to pay 20. They were 28%. And they gave us $550 billion up front. 100%, 500. We get 90, they get 10. 90%, they get 10. And there's no payment. It's not a loan or anything. It's a signing bonus, I call it.
The new trade agreement with Japan is now in effect. It will set a 15% tariff and see Japan invest $550 billion into U.S. manufacturing in exchange for lower import taxes on Japanese cars. The U.S. Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick says the deal creates an environment where Japan can do business with the greatest consumers in the world, that being Americans.
The press conference was a spectacle of American power. Flanked by the American aura and officials, the announcement was delivered not as a negotiation, but as a decree. The United States had secured a monumental trade deal with Japan, one that would funnel $550 billion in Japanese capital directly into American industries. Listen to this.
All right, so the Japanese, in order to buy down their tariff rate, so they had a 25% rate, and to buy down that rate, they have given President Trump $550 billion for President Trump to direct where and how he wants it invested in America. And if you think about that, that's 0.5% of GDP growth per year for the rest of his term, given to Donald Trump by the Japanese in order to build in America for our national and economic security. It is just the most fun working for Donald Trump. I mean, this deal is off the rails.
The narrative was clear. America was commanding its allies to reinvest in its own reindustrialization. But within weeks, that narrative shattered. Japan didn't just hesitate, it publicly, decisively, walked away. This wasn't merely a trade deal collapsing. It was a fundamental challenge to a core pillar of post-war global order, the expectation of American economic command. So we have to ask, when Japan said no, did it signal the end of an era? According to reports from the Financial Times, the initial agreement, hailed by Washington as the largest of its kind, was built on a critical concession. Japan would receive a 10% reduction in auto tariffs, but in return, its financial commitments would be managed through a new U.S. Federal Investment Accelerator. This office, as reported by Bloomberg, would grant American officials exclusive discretion over how and where the Japanese funds were spent, focusing on sectors like U.S. semiconductor plants and LNG terminals. U.S. Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick conveniently affirms some of it. Listen to him in the following pronouncement.
Well, what's special about the deal with Japan is this is not traditional investment. This isn't like the government saying, oh, Toyota is going to invest in America. This is literally the government of Japan giving Donald Trump and the American people $550 billion to invest at his direction on things that are important to America and national security. So I'll give you an example. Generic antibiotics. We don't make antibiotics. So Donald Trump could say, let's go build antibiotics, and we build generic antibiotics, and the Japanese government finances it for us. We want to build power and energy, nuclear. We want to finish out the Alaska pipeline. $550 billion at the discretion of Donald Trump. This is the National Security Sovereign Fund given to us because Donald Trump created this amazing tariff structure, and the Japanese understood they wanted to get down to 15%, and Donald Trump drove, really, when we were negotiating. Donald Trump was negotiating, and I was watching, and it was historic.
But in Tokyo, the political landscape was shifting. As covered extensively by Nikkei Asia, the resignation of Prime Minister Yoshihide Suga under pressure from his own party opened the door for a new leader, Fumio Kishida, who had built his campaign on a platform of economic sovereignty. Analysts noted that his administration was far less willing to accept what internal party memos, leaked to the Asahi Shimbun, called a neo-colonial model of investment. The breaking point was not the amount of money, but the mechanism of control. Sources within Japan's Ministry of Finance told Reuters that Washington's demand for full disbursement authority was a direct threat to Japan's own strategic interests. They argued that it would divert critical capital away from domestic priorities like robotics and green technology. This wasn't mere negotiation, it was a line in the sand. The response from Tokyo was not quiet diplomacy but a public rebuke. In a televised address to the Diet, Japan's chief negotiator, Toshimitsu Motegi, stated unequivocally that Japan will retain project selection power through the Japan Bank for International Cooperation. This statement, while technical, was a seismic event in diplomatic circles. The Wall Street Journal interpreted it as a quiet revolt, signaling that Japan would no longer finance American priorities at the expense of its own. The repercussions were immediate and global. The yen initially weakened by 2% on the news, reflecting market anxiety, while shares in American defense and energy contractors slated to benefit from the deal fell sharply. More importantly, as noted by analysts at XIS, it created a blueprint for defiance. Officials in South Korea, who were facing similar pressure for a $300 billion side deal, were reportedly emboldened to push back on US terms. This is according to insider accounts in the Korea Herald. The White House reaction, as reported by Politico, was one of frustration and disbelief. The administration had expected compliance from its most stalwart Asian ally. Instead, it was faced with a sophisticated, sovereign financial strategy. Threats to reimpose tariffs of 25% on Japanese electronics and auto imports were now seen as a double-edged sword, likely to further alienate other partners in the Indo-Pacific economic framework. This event forces a deeper analysis. For decades, the story of the Pacific has been one of American-led economic integration. But this collapse reveals a different truth. It shows that the tools of the past, coercion and conditional alliances, are failing in the face of resurgent national sovereignty. Japan's walkout wasn't just about tariffs or investment protocols. It was about narrative control. Who gets to write the rules of the next global economy? The message from Tokyo is now echoing in capitals from Brussels to Jakarta. Alliances are no longer about deference, they are about negotiation. The unipolar moment, where a single signature in Washington could dictate economic outcomes across the globe, is over. The walkaway is the proof. If you're ready to understand how this new multipolar world is being built, and who the real architects are, subscribe now. Our next investigation uncovers the silent financial networks that are already replacing the old order. This is Liberation Lens. And perspective has never mattered more.